want to go back to the phone lines, talk to Allison, listening in Lexington, Kentucky. Hi, Allison.
Hi, Hank. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. I have a question. I was wondering if you'd ever heard of a man named Hank Hanegraaff who wrote a few books. One of them I just finished called Pigs in the Parlor and Spiritual Warfare and Soul Ties. And he speaks about casting out demons and was wondering if you were familiar with all that.
Well, I am, and I certainly wrote a book that in part counters this whole notion of Christians being possessed by demons. Whatever language he uses, and there's obfuscation in the language, the point is that in his view, a Christian can have a deliverance of a demon. And I would say that that is a wrong view of spiritual warfare. A correct view of spiritual warfare is that as Christians, we can be tempted by Satan and his minions. They do, as it were, sit on our shoulder and whisper in our ear. The whisper, of course, can't be heard with the physical ear, but it does penetrate the ear of the mind. And the way to resist that is to put on the full armor of God. If we put on the full armor of God, we're guaranteed invincible in spiritual warfare. And if we don't, we're guaranteed casualties in spiritual warfare. So the whole idea of having deliverance for Christians is simply a capitulation to the culture. Pop culture beckons and Christians take the bait. So now we have Christians lining up for deliverances with the attendant benefit that they're not morally culpable for whatever the sin was in the first place. So if you have the sin of lust, you get the sin eradicated by having the demon exercised, and then you're not responsible for the sin at all because the devil made you do it. Or if you have the demon of cancer, you get that demon cast. I mean, this is a very poor model of spiritual warfare, and from my perspective, it is completely unbiblical as well.
Really? That's very interesting. Well, what do you think about casting out demons? Do you think that's necessary?
Well, I don't think that Christians can be demon-possessed. If you are a believer, your temple is the temple of the Holy Spirit, and that temple will not be shared by a demon.
What about people who, say, get angry and they, say a bad word, or people who are alcoholics and people who are weak and fall, into, some kind of sin? Is that not a demonic spirit that is causing that to happen to them?
Not necessarily.
Even though they're not possessed?
Not necessarily. I mean, I don't think that it is our place to try to figure out if it's the world, the flesh, or the devil. What we ought to be doing is putting on the full armor of God so that we can take our stand against principalities and powers of darkness.
Okay.
But there's no warrant whatsoever biblically for suggesting that a Christian can be demon-possessed. I mean, Jesus uses the illustration of a house and says, how can anyone enter a strong man's house and carry off his possessions unless he first ties up the strong man? Well, in the case of a demon-possessed person, the strong man is obviously the devil. In a spirit-indwelt believer, however, the strong man is God. And the force of Christ's argument leads inexorably to the conclusion that in order for demons to possess believers, they would first have to bind the one who occupies them, namely God himself.